Welcome, everyone. I call the November 16, 2022 Planning Commission meeting to order. The main purposes of tonight's meeting are public hearings on transfer of development rights at Canyon Park and on the bike plan, adoption of the bike plan. Before we move on to the agenda items, I'd like to acknowledge our hybrid meeting format. The City of Bothell is providing an option to attend this meeting either in person or remotely via Zoom. For those participating via Zoom, the chat and question functions are not available for use to ensure compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act. We have a public comment agenda item at the beginning of the meeting. This is time for issues not on tonight's agenda. Please limit these comments to 3 minutes. Public comment and hearing testimony will be allowed both in person and via Zoom, and those wishing to comment via Zoom are asked to submit an online form by 3 p.m. today. People wishing to submit written comments were encouraged to submit those comments, were also requested to submit those comments by 3 p.m. Email was encouraged as well and will be acknowledged. Those in attendance may also make comments and have been asked to indicate their desire to comment on sign-in sheets. The Imagine Bothell Notice, city website, and tonight's agenda all provided information to the public for providing comments. A video of this meeting will be streamed live as well as recorded and available for later viewing on the city's YouTube channel. A call-in number was provided on the meeting agenda for members of the public who wish to call in by phone and listen live to the meeting. For our phone-in callers during staff presentations, staff will make every effort to specify which materials they are referencing so everyone can follow along. At this point, I'd like to acknowledge the attendance of the commissioners. Commissioner Westerbeck.
Here.
Commissioner Curd.
Present.
Commissioner Robson.
Present.
Commissioner Anders has informed us she's been delayed and we expect her arrival shortly. Commissioner Gustafson.
Present.
And I'm the chair, Kevin Kiernan. We also have in attendance Deputy Community Development Director Ashley Winchell, Capital Division Manager Steve Morikawa. And attending remotely, we have Transportation Planner Sherman Gong. Lastly, before I begin, I'd like to reiterate some meeting guidelines. For all meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before speaking. Mute your microphone when not speaking. And if you are also streaming the live video feed, please turn off the sound as there is a delay. At specific breaks in the presentation, I'll be calling on members who wish to speak or ask a question. And if you want to speak, please indicate this by raising your hand. I will call on you as soon as I see you. This will help avoid the problem of having 2 people speaking at the same time. Identify yourself before you ask a question, make a motion, second a motion, or participate in debate. And please mute your microphone when not speaking. The first item on the agenda is public comment. The city has accepted visitor comment in writing as well as accepted sign-up sheets for those who wish to speak at tonight's meeting, though I see none. Written comments submitted to staff no later than 3 p.m. today were forwarded to all commissioners and are part of the record as well. This is the time for items not on tonight's agenda. Deputy Director Winchell, do we have any individual wishing to comment?
No one has signed up. We have 2 members in the audience. If they wish to speak on anything not on tonight's agenda, they can raise their hand and we'll allow them to speak as well.
All right, we'll give them a moment. Remote participants, please raise your hand if you wish to speak on items not on the agenda.
No hands are raised.
No hands? All right, then we will proceed. The next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. We have before us the minutes of the October 19th meeting. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
This is Karsten Kurd. I move to approve the meeting minutes from October 19th.
Is there a second? Yes. Commissioner Robson.
I second.
All right. Any discussion around those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes as submitted, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
All right, we have unanimous consent to approve the minutes as submitted. Thank you. New business. Do we have before us any new business?
No new business tonight.
No new business tonight? All right, thank you.
Hi, Chair Kiernan, Sarah Gustafson here. I'd like to add or suggest an item for the agenda, which would be to get some more information about the timeline for when City Council is considering the missing middle housing legislation, and possibly recommend a delegation of Planning Commission to go and speak to City Council when that time arises. What is
All right. Would it be all right with you if we handled that under unfinished business? We could bring
Absolutely.
it up as an item there.
Certainly.
And if the commission would like to develop a motion,
Okay.
we can certainly do that at that point and speak to the council on that item, which has been before us for quite some time.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
All right, so we'll bookmark that and get back to it under unfinished business. So at this point, then, I will open the public hearing on transfer of development rights at Canyon Park.
Right. Ashley Winchell, Deputy Community Development Director. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission, tonight we're bringing you all a public hearing on the transfer of development rights. So last time you all heard this, it was June. Nathan was the person presenting it to you, and I think we all know we've had some changes since then. We have been working diligently on this with our consultant team, as well as our partners at Sound Transit. And so what we're going to do tonight is provide some updates on the program overall and where we are. And then we will have time for questions. I also want to preface, before we get into this, that we provided you all with two recommendations in the packet. One, make a recommendation to forward to council with some potential changes that may happen around some language. And then also there was one to continue to December 7th to allow us to finalize that language. We've spoken with some members of the Canyon Park Business Owners Association who would like a little more time to review this. And so we would actually, before we get into this, just want to recommend that we continue this to December 7th. We plan on meeting with them, and we also want to make sure that our community partners have time to review the agenda that's before you all tonight. So, of course, the Planning Commission can make whatever recommendation they wish, but we recommend that we also give them some time. It is, I think you all have recognized, a pretty thick packet, and only half of it is Canyon Park, but to be a good partner, we think that would be the appropriate action. So with that, I will start my PowerPoint presentation. Sorry, I'm switching from two screens all the time to one, and so this is going to be a slight work of art for me. All right. So just to remind you of what the project scope is for this, essentially the City of Bothell has been working on a sub-area plan to guide development in the Canyon Park Regional Growth Center. It's a regional growth center is a designation by the Puget Sound Regional Council, or PSRC, and it has different criteria or framework for how many activity units, which is essentially population and jobs, that are required per acre. One of the challenges with reaching target activity units in Canyon Park will be the incoming Sound Transit Bus Bay North site. So, of course, the great part of BRT is we're going to have more connectivity, but the buses have to be stored somewhere and maintained somewhere, and that's happening in Canyon Park. And the facility, as you can imagine, isn't necessarily meeting those activity units. And so in order for us to maintain the activity units in Canyon Park, what we've determined would be an appropriate mechanism to keep those as a transfer of development rights program. So again, Sound Transit's planning for a 12.5 acre site in the area for this facility. It's a lower density of employment than planned for the neighborhood, and it will of course challenge the ability for the city to meet these density goals in the area. And so again, we're proposing that transfer of development rights to move the potential floor area from this site to other sites in the sub area. And so it sounds simple, but there's a lot of things that go into figuring out where can we move these units without causing potential transportation issues or other items. So tonight, we're going to talk to you about our updated Phase 1 report. So when this was with you all in June, we had originally done the transportation analysis around the intersection level of service versus corridor level of service, and the city of Bothell uses a corridor level of service, but we of course used some of the information from the intersection level of service to inform where we thought would be appropriate to be receiving sites. We also have updated code language. This language has been reviewed by Sound Transit. It's also been reviewed by the city of Bothell. We're still working out some minor changes, but essentially the way the program functions, we don't anticipate in some of the changes we're still looking at that the program would function any differently. It's kind of getting into like, should we call it a covenant or an easement? Should we call it a parcel or a lot? It's getting into some of those nitty-gritty details. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps. So, of course, some level of recommendation to City Council. We need to complete SEPA, and then, of course, City Council review. So, since it's been a while, just wanted to remind you all of what we've done in the past, or we, Nathan and me, have worked on. So before I was here, Nathan met with the Development Services Advisory Group to talk to them about the program. There were study sessions on this on February 16th and May 4th. The first public hearing was June 1st. We had a very brief public hearing on October 19th, or I don't even know if we could call it. It was more of an update. And then tonight, our public hearing on the work to date. So a lot of what this program relies on is having a sending site, which is the Sound Transit bus base north. And receiving sites, so where the activity units come from and where they go to. And the Phase 1 report provided us a lot of background information to figure out how to have a successful program. And the biggest thing that we needed to take into consideration of if we move activity from here to here is what does that do to our transportation network, and where can we make sure that we have minimal to no impact as we move things around. So I'm going to talk to you all about each of the scenarios, and just to add confusion to what's already a kind of confusing program, we have blocks that are numbered and then scenarios that are numbered, but the numbers don't go together. So we could have changed it to alphabet, but here we are. So hopefully this map helps. So scenario 1 moves 250 multifamily units to super blocks 1 through 4. So essentially it moves it from the receiving site to Thrasher's Corner. Scenario 2 moves it to super block 6, which is just to the west of the sending site. Sorry, I'm getting ready to say receiving site, sending site. So it's just to the west of the sending site off of Bothell Everett Highway. Scenario 3 moves 250 multifamily units to super blocks 13 through 16, so just south of 405. And then scenario 4 moving square footage of office to super block 5, so on the west side of Bothell Everett Highway. So as you can imagine, there was a kind of a process to this. To analyze each of these scenarios, we calculated the difference in trip generation for each site compared to what was assumed in the December 2020 final Canyon Park sub-area planned action EIS. And so that calculation included the following steps. We reduced trips from site 7, which is the Bus Bay North, the hatched area on the map. We reduced those, and that was applied to all 4 of the scenarios. Step 2 is we calculated the increase in trips related to the multifamily units, which would occur at various locations in scenarios 1, 2, and 3. And then step 3, we calculated an increase in trips to the office site that would happen in the vicinity of SR 527 in Canyon Park on the west side. And that's essentially scenario 4. So what we found, and then there were, just to preface, there were some parts of the site we just didn't consider based on information from the original EIS. So we didn't necessarily look at the Canyon Park Business Association area as a receiving site. And then we also didn't look at so pretty much super blocks 9 through, or 8 through 12. Sorry, they jumped from 8 to but 8 through 12 were not considered as potential receiving sites. So here's the findings from that traffic analysis. The effects of shifting development capacity are minor, in part due to the reduced number of peak trips anticipated on the Sound Transit Bus Bay North site. So of course, since we're moving trips away, that's reducing the transportation demand in that area. One of the most important considerations with this analysis is that peak trips from the preferred alternative assessed as a part of the sub-area plan will be reduced on the Sound Transit site, not only from the reduction in development, but from the changes in commuting patterns of the workers on the site, given the nature of shift work in that work facility. And that'll provide some level of mitigation of the impacts and potentially even slight improvements in traffic volume based on shifting activity units away. And then the next finding is patterns of development resulting from these shifts in capacity will result in minimal impacts to internal roads. So based on the assessment, many of the changes in the development identified in these scenarios are expected to have only small effects on traffic with internal roads in the area during peak hours. This suggests that no additional improvements would be necessary to these streets due to the shifts in development from the Transfer of Development Rights Program. And then the final finding is that there could be reductions in level of service due to shifts in development under different scenarios. So scenario 4, expected commercial development in Superblock 5 and would result in notable increases in delay and a shift from level of service D to F at the intersection of 214th and SR 527. So even though we only maintain a level of service based on corridor, we thought that this was a significant enough shift at the intersection that we should not consider it as a potential receiving site, to make sure that, you know, even though we only we look at corridor, the intersections are important too, and so we took that into consideration with scenario 4, which is Superblock 5. And then finally, this allowed us to have preferred locations for receiving sites from this assessment. The analysis shows that adding more commercial buildings to Superblock 5 would result in more significant impacts on the transportation system, and other areas make better receiving sites given the lower chance of transportation impacts from the shifts in activities and uses. So this is all really important because in the code updates that we've included in the packet, we need to show what's a sending site and what's a receiving site, and we can't have a code that tells you to do transfer of development rights if you don't know where you can put it. So this is all feeding into the code amendments that are in your packet. I know that Nathan went through these with you all, and so I just wanted to give an overview of what is in these amendments, and then when we get to questions and answers, I can provide feedback on more specific items that you may have questions about from our code amendments. Essentially, what we're looking at adding in the code, a purpose of the program, so it's always great when we're getting into a code, another planner inherits this and is like, why did we even do this? Purpose is very helpful in the future for intent. Definitions specific to the Transfer of Development Rights Program. There are a lot of fun terms in the packet, like receiving sites and certificates, easements, all of that. And so making sure that everything referenced in the code is defined so that planners using it and developers using it understand what these different terms we're using are. Information about how sending sites activity units will be calculated and what needs to be done to memorialize those activity units, information about how receiving sites are identified and how they can receive those units, and then basically how our Transfer of Development Rights Program will operate, different restrictions, and then potential incentives for receiving sites. We also included in your packet information about the process. So what do you need to do if you are the owner of a sending site? And so this is a really quick summary of all of the legal language in the code. How is it applied? They'll essentially apply with the city to get a certificate of TDR availability, and that's us doing a calculation, figuring out how many activity units they have. That is per our code. Per our proposed code would be valid for a time period of 5 years or until they actually send those activity units to a receiving site. And then we've also included, sorry. So once we've gotten our certificate of TDR availability, how do those certificates then go to a receiving site and are finalized through development activity? So essentially, everything from the purchase of those, how they can be used, and then how they'll be recorded. And then once a building permit's submitted, memorializing that additional floor area, moving to a receiving site. So just going through next steps. In the next few weeks, we're hoping to finalize the proposed code amendment language. We don't anticipate major changes from what's in your packet today, but anything that does change, we'll make sure to note it so that you know what changed and why it changed. We'll also be hoping to get a recommendation that night so that we can move this forward to City Council. Of course, as we're working through this, there's always things that come up that delay things, and so we're hoping for it to be done on the 7th, but of course, sometimes when you're dealing with a very technical legal thing, fun technical legal things come up that we need to address before we can move it forward. And so tonight, we'd like to have more conversation with you all, any feedback, questions, any more information you'd like to see from us before you make a formal recommendation. And then our recommended motion is to continue the public hearing to not the November 7th, but the December 7th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. And so with that, I am happy to answer any questions you all have, open up the code and share it on the screen and go through anything you'd specifically like to ask about. And if I can't answer things tonight, I'll make sure to get responses for December 7th, 2022.
All right, thank you, Deputy Director Winchell. I'd like to start with any general questions from the commissioners and then jump into the code as desired there. So any general comments or questions? Yes, Commissioner Gustafson.
Hi, Ashley. Sarah Gustafson here. Thanks for this packet. It's great to see the comparison to other cities, and I really like that it's clearly laid out what the cost of a credit unit would be. I see it's anywhere from about $14,000 to about $25,000. And I was wondering if you could just walk us through what is, just summarizing it for us again, I know we've been through this, what is the value that the developer will get for that, say, $20,000 credit?
So essentially, what it will allow them to do is we have minimums and maximums of how
Right.
much you can develop on a site, and this would allow a developer to develop more than the code may permit them to develop. So they get additional floor area or units that they can move essentially from one site to another. So essentially, the Bus Bay North site wouldn't be able to develop those units in the future because that development capacity has been. So if someone wants to do something bigger than what they may be permitted to do outright, it gives them the opportunity to buy the right to do that while reducing the right to do that somewhere else. So because I'm newish to Bothell, I can't remember the name of it, but there's a big farm on the west side
Yes.
of town. And that's a great example of a transfer development rights that happened with King County back in the day where they wanted to preserve rural land. So it's similar to that. Cities can use this to preserve things in one space or allow for something while taking those development rights and giving them to another area.
Yes, thank you. I think that's a really great way to summarize the big picture of it, and I appreciate it. I think my question was getting at, like, what are the numbers that a developer would get? So they pay $20,000. Like, how much far does that correspond to, and what kind of square footage would be looking at to apply that far to? So I don't know if it makes sense to ask Carrie maybe as our developer and architect, like, does that seem like a fair price for what the developer would be getting? So
I appreciate the toss my way, but every project is so
Yeah.
different
yeah,
that it's literally project by project, pro forma by pro forma. So I'd actually was interested to see that Redmond had done a lot of these. So there's examples of successful ones. I'm more curious about that as far as like the global view of this. So, they ran pages and pages and pages of calculations showing it, from my understanding, and from past meetings, what would make it attractive to developers and, reduced parking,
right.
certain price for the credits. So I kind of base it off of other cities, like the other staff and Burke has done here.
And I think one thing we could potentially do on the 7th, so our consultant from Burke wasn't able to be here tonight,
Yeah.
but he would be much better versed to get into the details of the
Yeah.
pro forma. And so what we could maybe talk about is a little bit of how that works, and how, so there's the reality too of it may take a while for there to be a market for these credits.
Right.
So it could be that someone's analyzing a site in Thrasher's Corner and they can't make a profit if they go over a certain floor area ratio because
Right.
it's going to put them into a different type of development. So they're going from wood to metal and
Right.
they have to, and so it may be a reality too that these credits may hang out for a while until the
Right.
market catches up with what would be a profitable development. So there's a lot of factors that result in whether these credits will be used next week or these credits will be used
Right.
in 20 years. And so it really is preserving the opportunity for these units to be developed. And it could even be that that they're not used for 50 years and Sound Transit moves the facility and they put the credits back at the site. So it's hard to say if and when the credits will be used.
Yeah.
But it has been successful in other communities as a way to
Yeah.
preserve, at least preserve the right to have that amount of density.
Yeah, thank you.
But I'll add that to the summary on the 7th to just kind of walk through how that works a little bit more.
Yeah, because I think that would be really helpful. Thank you, Ashley. I mean, sorry, Community Director
You
Ashley.
can call me Ashley. It's
Yeah.
okay. It's a really long title. It's a lot to say.
Yeah, 'cause I am getting a little flustered because I'm looking at the calculations and I don't understand them, and that's making me worried.
I'd like to pause for just a moment and recognize that Commissioner Andrews
Yeah.
has joined us. Thank you for your efforts to get here. I understand the challenges you had, so welcome to the meeting.
Thank
And
you.
we're on the Canyon Park Development Rights agenda item. Yes, Commissioner Robson.
Thank you, Chair. Right along with Commissioner Gustafson's question, we sort of started edging into the idea of banking and how we're going to be using these units and how we're going to be tracking those at City Hall. I didn't thoroughly analyze this very large packet, but maybe you could just address that and summarize that verbally for us.
Yeah, so let me get into the code. So essentially, once they'll have their certificate, once they apply for the transfer of development rights, those will essentially be held in a bank by the city, and so we'll be keeping track of those. To be quite honest, as we're developing the program, we also need to figure out exactly how we track that through banking. There will be a covenant recorded as a part of the property, and so it'll be running with the property that these credits have been sold. It'll also be something that we'll be tracking internally and coming up with a mechanism of keeping track of what's been banked, who owns it, how's it been sold, and how we'll be keeping track of that is something that we're still working on internally.
Thank you.
Other commissioner questions? Commissioner Curd?
Thanks. Thank you for the presentation. One of the things that popped out to me in the packet was on page 30 about the surplus property policies. And the thing that jumped out was that if the surplus properties have not been developed within a 10-year period, ownership can revert back to Sound Transit. And I'm wondering, I have a couple of questions about that policy. One would be, the next sentence here is that we want to ensure that the transferred properties do not become speculative, but that they're actually developed. And so how is the city kind of planning to advertise the program to potential developers in Canyon Park? Is that like when someone comes forward with a plan or pre-application, would there be a time to have the city sort of like advertise the program? And
So you're looking at page 30 of the pro forma? Is it this?
page 30 of 243.
Okay, surplus properties policies. So I have Gary Yao here with Sound Transit, and I believe what this section is about is how Sound Transit disposes of their surplus properties. And so let me see if Gary can, there he is. Gary might be able to provide more information. I can give a really cursory summary, but I'll let Gary take it.
Sounds good. Thank you, Ashley. My name is Gary Yao. I am a Sound Transit Senior Current Planner. So I look at land use and zoning for our projects, and I am the main point of contact for the Transfer Development Rights Program work, which we've been closely collaborating with Ashley and with the city's consultant Burke on developing. Commissioner Curd, to answer your question, speaking to first the Sound Transit statutory surplus, the RCW statutes that address how Sound Transit surpluses property. Per the statutes, the agency is required to surplus 80% of its property, of surface property that is suitable for housing development to qualified entities. And within those properties that are surplus in that manner, 80% of that needs to be developed as affordable housing that is at or below 80% of the county area median income. So that is the policy. And with regards to the 10-year time limit as to when Sound Transit may desire to have the development rights back with the site and with Sound Transit, I think that was actually more of a discussion topic that we've had and we haven't fully hammered out. I would say that I think the agency and the city, we certainly have a mutual goal of supporting affordable housing development. So we do want to see to get these credits used, but I wouldn't be too hung up on that 10-year timeline, because that actually does not come from state statutes that regulate how Sound Transit surpluses its property. So sorry for the very technical and long-winded response, but I hope that provides a little bit more clarity here.
That does. Thank you so much. So if I'm hearing right, it's not necessarily a 10-year hot potato to get it developed. We have time to advertise the program and work with developers. One of the questions I have about the scenarios that were run then would be scenario one discusses Thrasher's Corner and what are the challenges involved with seeing property be developed outside of the current jurisdictional boundary.
So we analyzed that and in anticipation that hopefully someday we will annex. And so that's a great point, because 3 and 4, until we annex, would be the only super blocks that could receive the activity units or be receiving sites until annexation. But if, in the near future, we annexed and someone had super block 1 or 2 and wanted to make it a receiving site, then it would be eligible. But we don't have a mechanism right now to send them outside of Bothell. But we did analyze it so that we would be ready if we ever could.
Understood. Thank you so much for the clarifications.
Yes, Commissioner Robson.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, again. Along those lines regarding the different blocks, can you restate or reclarify for me, did you say that Block 5 is not a good choice for inclusion in this program?
Correct. I'm going to reshare the findings screen because I think it's easier to talk about these when you can see them.
Sure.
Okay. So essentially, what we found was that there were nominal impacts, minimal impacts to traffic patterns in 1, 2, and 3, but 4 had impacts to the intersection that made it undesirable for making it a receiving site because it would need potential mitigation, and that wasn't one of the factors that we were looking for when we were looking for ideal receiving sites. We were looking for minimal to no impact.
And 5, as you said, 4 is not a good site, and 5 just.
So this is where it gets super confusing. Super block 5 is scenario 4.
Yes, that is a bit confusing.
Yes, until I made the map,
Significant impacts will not be a receiving site. Oh, no.
Just like scenario 2 is super block 6, correct?
yes, I apologize. Ideally, we would have done like scenario A.
I'm going to sit with this for a minute.
I mean, it's not too late for us to change what we call them.
Yes, Commissioner Westerbeck.
Commissioner Westerbeck here. Maybe you covered this and I missed it, but you talked about blocks or I can't remember not super blocks, but 8 through 12. Does that coincide with the Canyon Park as a business owners association kind of area? Or are they all over? And that they go beyond that, or is that primarily where they're representative?
I believe that's primarily where they're representative, and our goal was to look at some of these blocks on the outside, understanding
Sure.
some of the traffic patterns.
Were they uninterested in becoming a receiving site, or are they just not in consideration?
I would need to dig into this packet of how we got there. It's a conversation I had a while ago.
Okay.
But I can prepare an answer for the next meeting to talk about how we selected which sites we were looking at. I think a lot of it had to do with the initial analysis from the EIS.
Okay.
And so that was one of the reasons why we considered the items in blue and purple on
Sure.
this.
I know that you said that they still had more comments and they were still reviewing everything. And I know that they have also had litigation with the city in the past about the Canyon Park sub-area plan and other things. So I was just curious if that had played in. So you obviously don't have to answer now. And I don't need a thorough answer later. I was just curious if that was part of it, that they just said, nope, not interested.
And I do believe when we get to public comment, we have a member of the Canyon Park Business Owners Association here. And so they may be able to provide some insight too. I know it's in this packet of why we didn't, but it is not coming to the top
Sure.
of my head. So I'll make sure to cover that on the 7th.
And I'm not even suggesting it change, but I've always wished that area would be more dense and it's closer to services and things. So, well, not necessarily closer. You got things up by Fred Meyer and like Thesher's Corner area, but just interesting. So, appreciate it.
Other commissioners? Commissioner Curry?
Thank you. It's on page 42 of 243 at the bottom, 3 bullets. Why superblocks 8, 9, 10, and 11 and 12 are not included. So that's
Thank you. I skimmed too fast.
no worries. It's a big packet.
So a comment and then a question that you probably can't answer. Just for the record, I think it is important to directly recognize that the Sound Transit development has an effect of reducing peak trips from a traditional development. So to get the buses need to be on the road during peak hour. To get them on the road, the drivers need to be there earlier and get out before the peak. So that particular block is not contributing to peak congestion. I've dealt with this in other projects. So I think it's really important to have that out there on the record. My question you probably can't answer goes to timing. So this is dependent upon the application being filed. And is this, so it's not dependent on any other permits? It's the filing of the application that makes these development rights available?
Yeah, so essentially what will happen with the Sound Transit site is we have to go into an interlocal agreement with them, and that will be essentially the mechanism by which these rights are extracted from the site. And so they will kind of exist on paper until at some point they are then sold and developed elsewhere. So they're kind of going to be in this weird limbo until where they exist on paper until they're purchased and developed elsewhere. Does that answer the question? And we don't know, we know, before they can receive their permits, they need to have gone through the process to essentially extract the activity units from the site, because otherwise the proposal wouldn't be in compliance with the code. But we don't know when they'll actually be purchased or how long they will exist kind of only on paper.
Okay, so the development rights could be available on execution of the interlocal agreement, but must be available no later than the issuance of the permit, the use permit.
Yes, because we can't issue a permit that's not in compliance with our code.
Sure, okay. And is it wishful thinking to hope that the interlocal agreement will be relatively non-controversial since all of this work has been done ahead of time?
One would hope, but one will never know until.
Yes. Are there other elements to the interlocal agreement than this? Presumably there are some other issues which will need to be addressed before.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it's kind of that working agreement of how this project will move forward between the city and Sound Transit. But the main goal of that interlocal agreement will be to pull out these development rights and memorialize that at council.
So to the best of your knowledge at this point, that is the most significant issue in the negotiation of the ILA, though there may be others that hopefully will be take less time than this one.
We've said that developing the program may actually take longer than implementing the program. So we'll see.
Wouldn't be the first time a permit took longer than a project. Other comments or questions from commissioners? All right, any other highlights of this item? Were there any questions specific to the code from commissioners? I know we looked at it a long time ago. Seeing none, did you indicate that there might be a public comment on this?
I believe that there are two members of the public that are here on this item, and one of them does have their hand raised if we wanted to move to public comment.
Seeing no other commissioner comments, let's move to public comment.
I am moving in Molly Lawrence. All right, Molly, you are now in the virtual room and able to address our Planning Commission.
Thank you very much, Deputy Director Winchell, whose name I hope I have not just butchered. Hi, you all. Thank you very much. My name is Molly Lawrence. I'm outside counsel from Van S. Feldman to the Canyon Park Business Center Owners Association. And I guess my first comment tonight would be to simply appreciate the request by Deputy Director to extend the public hearing to the 11th of December. The Canyon Park Business Center Owners Association is a board-driven entity, and several of our board members own properties within Block 6, Block 7, Block 9, Block 10, right? I'm looking at the exhibit as it's shown on the screen, and are all very interested in this proposal. And I think as Deputy Director Winchell has indicated, we will have a meeting after the holiday, after Thanksgiving, to give them a bit more information that will then enable us to come back on December 7th with any comment. So I really appreciate that. Only other thing I would say tonight, because I do think we'll come back on the 7th with additional substantive comments, is just the question about why there might not have been consideration of 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And yes, I see some text in the packet about that for sure. But as I think most of you are aware, we have been engaged in litigation with the city in the past. And the focus of that litigation really has been our frustration with the city's effort to place more development in the park without making corresponding transportation improvements to ensure that there's adequate traffic capacity to accommodate the additional trips that will come from that development. And I think you'll continue to hear that message from us as you begin to move into the comprehensive plan update in 2024, and you'll probably hear it in my comments on the 7th. But we have a continuing concern and interest in the desire of the city, and we, I think most developers appreciate the opportunity for more development on their property and the value that that brings. But as you likely know, in the Canyon Park sub area, in this area, traffic has gotten to be such an issue that it is actually holding back the ability of the area to develop unless and until the city is able to address some of those transportation concerns. So thanks again to Deputy Director Winchell, and thank you all for considering this. I'll also say we are working collaboratively with Sound Transit on this project. So thanks for your efforts, and I will see you again on the 7th, unless you have questions for me.
Commissioners have any questions? Looking across, I see none. So thank you for your comments, and expect to hear from you again December 7th.
Thanks very much.
Is there another commenter in the waiting room?
If any of the other attendees would like to make comment, please raise your hand. Otherwise, we will assume you do not want to make comment. I don't see any other hands raised.
All right, thank you. With that, I think we can close public comments for now. Shall we look at the findings and recommendations? Would the commission like to take a look at that so that we can move right through? I'm not thinking anything we'll hear next week will change that part of it.
Would you like me to share it on the screen?
Yeah, please. So we do have before us some draft findings, conclusions, and recommendations, which we would adopt if we move this forward at the next meeting. So maybe for the sake of time at the next meeting, we can look at it now. So a lot of these are boilerplate. The findings up through, I'd say 7, up through 6 are straight up factual. And 7 indicates specifically what we're finding. I'll give the commissioners a moment to take a look at those and see if there are any questions or comments on those findings. A, B, and C. Watching folks to see. All right, seeing none, I think we've got a agreement on the specific findings, which moves us 8, 9, and 10 are pretty factual and straightforward. So the conclusions speak to what we are concluding on this item. Any comments there? And we will look at this again at the next meeting. So if you do feel you'd like to add something to speak directly to the council on this, we'd have that opportunity then. I just wanted to be sure that everyone was focused on this before we move on. All right, seeing none, I think we're at the point now where we can consider what action to take, and the choices. We do have a recommendation that we continue the hearing to December 7th to allow a little more time to work with the Canyon Park Association. So do I have a motion to continue? Commissioner Curd?
I move to continue the public hearing on Canyon Park transfer development rights until December 7th, 2022.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second the motion to continue.
All right, that was Commissioner Westerbeck seconding.
Oh, thanks.
Any discussion around that motion? Yes. So we will look forward to hearing from the parties then, and hopefully moving this off of our desks here. So all in favor of the motion to continue to December 7th, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we have all 6 present commissioners voting in favor of that. So we will continue this public hearing until December 7th. That will move us on to the public hearing on the bike plan. So with that, I'll open the public hearing on the bike plan, and let's proceed.
Good evening, Steve Morikawa here. Sherman has a little cough, so conservatively, he's actually upstairs all alone in the dark, and he will be presenting over the computer today, so please bear with us.
Hello, I'm here, so can we want to just start with the share the screen?
All right, we have Transportation Planner Sherman Gong before us to present the Bothell Bike Plan. So let's proceed.
All right. Oh, it's disabled. So finish screen sharing.
Sherman, is it not giving you permission to share your screen?
Yeah, it said host disabled participant screen sharing.
Let me see if I can make you a co-host. I didn't do it, I swear. Try sharing your screen now.
Okay.
That worked?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see. I'm gonna go here and then. Sorry. Right. All right, everybody sees the screen there, right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right, well, good evening, commissioners. Again, this is Sherman Gong, and hope you can hear me okay through this mask and everything. I'm City Transportation Planner, and as you already mentioned, Steve Morikawa, the Capital Division Manager, is with us. Tonight, we just will be discussing the bike plan in its final form based on the previous comments expressed during the study sessions we've had with you. I'll give you a short background of where we were and the final format of the plan. And we'll go over a few minor network revisions that were missed on the ultimate vision map. And then finally, we'll go through the comprehensive plan amendment changes that we are also proposing. We want to thank you for your time and patience as we prepared the bike plan for your final review here before we make a recommendation to City Council for approval. Okay, and let's see here. Since we last met with you, which was September 21st, we have revised the plan from including various bike facility types to a predominantly protected bike lane network as the ultimate vision for the city now. We have also identified additional projects that could be considered for connectivity, such as I-405 crossings and signal operations along that corridor, plus a couple of others. And we revisited the project prioritization criteria to reflect emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion elements, as well as school routes. With the primary changes to the plan, as I just described, the format of the original draft plan went from a Part A and Part B plan to just the ultimate vision plan that is represented in the final plan that you have now and attached to your packet. The plan considers prioritizing and ranking all of the protected bike lane corridors, and along with a few of the bike connectivity projects I just mentioned, that will enhance and expand the existing network. We considered funding that we will use for considering for funding and implementation. And although the ranking that we develop is determined based on the criteria and is just one of many factors to consider for project funding and does not solely determine the order of which projects get funded or constructed. The proposed bike plan needs to be adopted into the city's comprehensive plan to become the official document of reference, which will be done by an action. That action is TR-A65 that we've amended to the comprehensive plan language. And the and the comprehensive plan bike section, which you see here, should reflect the new vision of the city bike network. Staff proposes to amend the current comprehensive plan by revising the transportation element to show the bike section as is shown in the attached in your packet. The revisions basically focus on level service requirements for the addition of protected bike lane facilities to be applicable to new development for concurrency. And the figure TR7, which is referenced in the comprehensive plan, will be replaced by the ultimate vision plan map, which is map 4 in the bike plan. See, then, and this is just some edits that I wanted to kind of go through for that's in that map 4, the ultimate vision that we caught, but just didn't have time to make these changes. So I just wanted to kind of go through them with you real quick. The first one is to realign Main Street. You can see my cursor here between Bothell Way and 98th. This is kind of following the old Main Street alignment, and it needs to go directly straight across, like towards the library and stuff. And to continue it across all the way to 96, and then to bend down to 180th Street right here, this which is a protected bike lane. That's the first adjustment that we'll make. The second one is to add a shared path, which is already existing right here between 180th and 98th Avenue on SR 522 on the south side. There's already a shared use path there, and so that should be included right here as well. And then little bit of confusion. So this is up here on Ross Road is we had indicated as a neighborhood greenway, but we don't really want bicyclists to come down here to 185th, which is the transit corridor leading over to campus via Beardsley and all that. So ultimately, we're just going to just cut off this section of the neighborhood greenway and have direct bicyclists to go north up Ross Road and then come back onto the Beardsley Boulevard and the North Creek Trail to come back into campus, which is a lot safer than coming down this way to 185th and then ultimately merging with all that transit traffic. And then the last thing is just this little black mark, which I'm not sure, I think it's just a graphical error here that we need to remove. It doesn't mean anything. So that's for the map revisions. And then the next steps are right now, we are just going to finalize those revisions for the plan as we prepare for council. And we are preparing our SEPA checklist right now for review and comment period. And all I have for you guys tonight. If you have any questions, I'd gladly answer those for you. I'll stop sharing.
All right, commissioners, questions on Transportation Planner Gong's presentation? Commissioner Gustafson?
Yes, Sarah Gustafson here. Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Sherman. Thanks, Planner Gong, for putting together the map and getting it to the next step. This is really exciting. I did want to go over what you were saying about the route from, I guess, Bothell Landing to Main Street. Maybe we could flip back to that. So it still looks like the main way to get from Bothell Landing to Main Street is along Bothell Everett Highway, or are we going to instead use, I guess it would be 98th Street as the preferred route? Sorry, on page 171 of the plan. So, is the main recommended route going to be still along Bothell Everett Highway?
You're muted if you're talking to us.
I'm going to unmute. Sorry, I was muted there for a second. So the access to downtown from Bothell Landing is at crossings at 98 or Bothell Way or over the bridge on 102nd if you follow the trail a little bit and then get up and above SR 522. You can also cross a little further west at 180th. So there's really, that's how this downtown was set up, was those crossings to get into downtown at those four basically locations.
Yeah,
There's not, that answers your question?
Yeah, thank you. I think right now as it stands, the Bothell Way crossing from Bothell Landing is really difficult to do. So it sounds like we're going to emphasize 98th Avenue and mark that up and perhaps show that as something that would receive potentially protected lane status in the future.
So I'm not quite, I guess maybe I just need a little clarification as to what you mean by a protected facility going across 522.
Yeah, because
it's a crosswalk I mean, I'm not sure how you would do a protected crossing of SR 522 unless it was a bridge over
Yeah.
the whole thing. That would be something more like what 102nd Bridge, you know, from the kind of the gravel parking area up and over.
Yeah.
That would be, and that's going to be a protected bike lane in the future with that bridge. It'd be a shared use trail. So that would be the closest to something that is actually protected, but it won't be, I mean, I don't know how you would do a protected bike lane across a multi-lane highway.
Yeah.
You know, it just, unless it's a grade separated facility, and that was never that hasn't been identified in our plans other than at 102nd.
Yeah. I was thinking maybe perhaps once you get onto 98th and when you curl around onto Main Street, are there any plans for that being protected, or is that just not considered to be dangerous enough?
From 98th to from 98th, intersection of 98th and Main Street,
Yeah. So
Main Street will be like a neighborhood greenway, basically, because
okay.
the volumes on that and the traffic speed is very low. And it'd be just like a downtown, you know, like
Right.
we're not you're sacrificing to put protected facilities on Main Street. You're sacrificing a lot of business, you know, property or parking, which is very important to the downtown businesses.
Okay, but it looks like 98th will be considered a neighborhood greenway then.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
We could make that. I mean, you know,
Sherman,
definitely for that little small section there.
Yeah.
yeah, Sherman, I don't think that's going to work because 98th is going to be the transit corridor.
Oh,
that's
okay.
true.
So
Yeah.
what's happening here is north-south, as we get to downtown, it does get difficult.
Right.
I mean, we're hoping to, if we can get the core downtown more like a neighborhood greenway,
Right.
and I think it kind of works.
Yeah.
But 98th is hard. There's a
That's true,
traffic
definitely.
signal you can get across, but then you have to understand that there's going to be a lot of buses going up and down there.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
really don't want them to mix. 180th is great, but it's headed kind of west. That's not
Yeah.
a good crossing point. 527, it is crossing 6 lanes. We
Yeah.
worked hard with transit to get that lanes out of there and get it down to 6 lanes, but we you know, it is a big crossing.
Right.
And then you are using the access lanes, which are probably comfortable for a lot of people, but certainly not for kids and everything. They're pretty slow. I've seen
Yeah.
people walking up there with, you know, strollers and things, but you do not want your kids there, you know, but a lot of adults will probably be very comfortable there. 101st is difficult because it's not signalized. We worked
Yes.
with WashDOT, we couldn't get a crossing there. There's just too many signals in a row. So 102nd Avenue is a good one. We're trying to replace the bridge, but that's some years out. I'm hoping 5 to 7 years maybe. And if we do that, we could get a shared use path on one side. And if we can get that really broken up sidewalk all the way down to East Riverside Drive replaced, that would be wonderful. That would be a shared use path. So that would be a great crossing. But again, lining everything up from the north across 522 to the south is a little problematic. There's that downtown core. We somehow have to kind of get people to jog over a little bit and use some of the signals in crossing areas.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Other commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Robson.
I have a question about the, excuse me, discouraging bikers to go down the main transit corridor by changing the bike over here by Beardsley and into that neighborhood over here. I see that you guys are altering the originally planned bike paths so that they don't take that main transit route down into the college. So, yeah, right. Sorry, I can circle it on my page, but you guys can't see it. So I'm wondering, How much is taking out that small inlet into that neighborhood, just, I believe it's north of Beardsley, really going to discourage people from shooting through, really going to encourage people to go considerably from what looks like pretty far out of their way to go north, and forgive me, I can't see the name of this road that you're channeling them down towards.
100 and, well, you're talking about that Ross Road connection
Yeah,
that I just showed you earlier?
yeah.
Yeah, so there's, oh, go ahead.
I was just wondering, you had mentioned that you're afraid that they'll shoot down a more dangerous transit corridor, but it's been my experience that if there's a shorter way to get there, they'll just do it, unless there's actually some sort of barrier there, because it does look like it's considerably out of their way to go north and then come south if that's where they're headed. So what are the plans on that?
So the purpose of that connection on Ross Road is to provide a path for that really isn't that much farther.
Okay.
You backtrack a little bit if you ever, and it's much safer for anybody really like north on Maywood Hill going to campus. They could cut across. That's 187th is the neighborhood street there, and just follow. It's a downhill, goes downhill towards like basically that area is called the Bothell Gateway. Is it called Gateway? I forget that. You know that development down there, and then they could cross. They could cross and come at a light right there and come and just come down the North Creek Trail, which is a very easy travel way, you know, and a lot safer than coming all the way down to either try to use 185th, which I would imagine some experienced bikers may want to do, and come across to Beardsley going east. But then again, they'll have to, you know, either cut through campus at 185th or travel back up Beardsley, which will be a protected bike lane too, you know, and then come into campus. So they definitely, if you're coming from the north though, you definitely won't, you know, I can't see somebody coming all the way down 104th, all the way to Main Street, and then turning around and going back up Beardsley to get to campus, you know?
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing. You're just backtracking one way or the other. So we felt the Ross Road connection, it's a neighborhood street, low volume, low traffic, low speed. There's at the end of Ross Road, there's a little trail. You'd probably have to dismount a little. You have to dismount there and walk it because it's kind of like a little switchback for just a little ways, and then you're basically back on the street. So, and then you can just get to that intersection and cross into the North Creek Trail and ride that back into campus. And again, that's, you know, the focus of that is like for everybody north on Maywood Hill and trying to come down, you know, from that direction. Anybody from the west, you know, definitely that would probably go through downtown, Main Street or whatever, and just ride straight up Beardsley Boulevard to campus. So that was the intent of that corridor. If that answers your question, Commissioner. If you need more clarification, I'll try to explain it a little different or show you pull a map up or something.
I'm just letting it settle for a second. Yes, thank you. I'll, if I have further questions, I'll raise my hand. Thank you.
All right.
Yes, I was going to note, as you did mention, at the eastern end of Ross Road, you do have to dismount. And as it's currently configured, there are some barriers, and you cannot physically ride through there.
No,
is there any thought of modifying that at all, or?
I And I'm not sure, we haven't really thought about anything so you could stay on, or you'd have to create you'd have to create a different path, for a bicyclist to stay on the bike and ride through that. But again, it's not a long ways to switch back through there.
Yeah, I've ridden it, so I'm familiar. So
Yeah. And I think but it's just from a safety standpoint, a lot better ultimately, it'll be a lot easier for bicyclists to traverse that way to get to campus. Or even to 195th and going over the North Creek Trail to connect, you know what I mean? To go to the east side of the 405.
yes, 195th has its own set of issues, which we've raised in other meetings.
Yes, we have.
Other commissioner comments? Commissioner Curd?
Thank you. Thanks, Planner Gong, for the presentation and for the maps. I have two questions about projects that are listed in the plan. The first, as long as we're talking about the Beardsley area, project number 8, which is the protected bike lanes along Beardsley. My question is if that is kind of that project might be prioritized during stride improvements to the corridor, or is that kind of the impetus behind its high rating?
The ranking for Beardsley Boulevard, is that what you mean? Is that what you're talking about, or are you timing? Are you talking about more about timing?
I'm talking a little bit about timing, just because Sound Transit will be issuing their I think 60% plans for the stations and the routes in Bothell along the transit corridor soon. I think you probably know more than anyone.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if this protected bike route, are you advocating for that during these kind of plan developments, or what's going on there?
Well, the plan right now for Beardsley is that portion of Beardsley Boulevard that is a part of the Stride project. That timing is kind of on its separate from anything else. Like, I wouldn't say the whole corridor is going to get built at the same time, if that's what you're asking, i.e. anything west of 185th. May come later at different times than the segment that's between 185th and the campus access. And even beyond the campus access, that's a different project. That's part of the widening, the Beardsley widening project between the highway and campus. So kind of 3 different projects really for the Beardsley corridor per se.
Sherman, you want me to take a shot?
Sure.
Okay. So kind of in order of work. So the fire station, that intersection, everything to the west of that to 104 is going to be a 3-lane facility in the long run. Right now, we don't have a project to put protected bike lanes there, but that's the idea. From the fire station to North Campus entrance, on the south side, Husky Village is getting redeveloped. We were able to work with the campus and Sound Transit, and they're going to put a protected bike lane there behind the bus stops. So that'll be cool. When you get closer to the North Campus entrance, they're putting you back on the street for now because there's a short segment there they're not improving. And from 185th, that kind of odd road that goes up into the campus, up in behind, from there to the west, there won't be a protected bike lane. There'll probably be a bike lane there for now because that whole frontage is not getting redeveloped. So we got a good long length for Sound Transit and the campus to work on. Our thought is on the north side, when that redevelops, we got Sound Transit to work with us to kind of lay it out, but we can't get them to pay for it. I think if they put a short-term bus stop there, the bike lane may go behind the bus stop, but it's going to be a relatively short segment, just to make sure they don't conflict with the buses. But we'll wait for development on that side, which I think that one, I mean, there's a lot of pressure on that side, I think, of the road. As you get to between North Campus entrance and I-405, currently there's on-street bike lanes. They will remain for now. With the village there, just brand new, it's very hard for us. We would have to rip everything out, put protected bike lanes. So that would be in our prioritization list. On the south side, we're trying to get another lane eastbound, and that's to help transit as well, because there's 2 lanes, should be 2 lanes in each direction. And there will be a bus stop for BRT just before they take a right turn on I-405, and they will stop in line. So that in the short term, that unfortunately that 5-foot bike lane is going to stay. It'll go behind the bus stop though. But on the south side, there is the trail. So there is a protected bike facility. It is a little funky because at the north entrance, you have to hop across and everything. But that's kind of where we are right now.
That's really good information to know. Thank you for explaining that in detail. I know I have a lot of people asking about, what the plan is for Beardsley, especially because of the current gap on the north side. Just, I guess it'd be west of the village. There's no bike lane on that north side. It turns into just sidewalk, and it's a new sidewalk. And so I field a lot of questions from the community about that. But really exciting, especially to hear that there's some planning in the works for bike lanes behind the bus stops. That's cool. The other project I wanted to kind of pull and talk about was project number 41. It is the protected bike lanes on 228th between 9th and Bothell Everett Highway. And I looked at the rankings. So this is kind of situated, project 41 is between project 7, which is the bike lanes over Nike Hill, and project 6, which is, the kind of the flat part, and then up into the hill on the other side. But we have this gap here that we're planning basically for what could be decades or centuries. And I'm wondering, the prioritization of number 41, this is on the second to last page of the whole packet. It highlights safety, employment, transit, and connectivity. And then the projects for 7 and 6 on either adjacent side do the same things, but they also highlight equity. And I'm wondering about, if these projects on either side, which do connect to some of the mobile home, the mobile home parks on either side of 527, will this route developing a kind of a gap for decades really be an equitable decision to make? And could we possibly take advantage of the scale of redeveloping 228th, which is already an extremely kind of complex engineering wise and geotechnically. So adding that little segment from 9th to 527, why is that not part of Project 7 instead, going over Nike?
The reason we separated that, Commissioner Kurt, is because that segment, it's in itself is very important because it's part of the north-south spine, Bothell Way. It's going to be the connector between 9th and Bothell Way to carry from downtown, all the way to the north end of the city. So even though it's, like I said, these rankings and the criteria we used sets a specific ranking, doesn't mean that that's the order of the project. So because, if there is a project that um, that will present an opportunity to do, either side of this little segment. It's a very good chance that you're going to redevelop this part two. It's just that when we broke it out, we separated this segment because it is a very critical portion of the of our whole entire network. I mean, for the north-south corridor. And so we wanted to break that out separately because that project kind of would score in itself a little differently from even in a grant opportunity, for example. We would say this is important because it's part of our north-south route, for example. And there's, again, it's just because it's a short section, it doesn't connect to, you could say it connects to like the mobile homes or anything like that, but everything could connect to something via a different or an added, route. So the way we did this ranking, we just had to say, if it actually, the route actually went by a affordable housing or a mobile home park, then we gave it additional points as far as equity goes. And so, just so you could it made more significance than saying, well, for example, to the east on 228th, where that mobile home park is, well, 35th is just as an important connection to it as 228th is, right? To go north-south. But where do you draw the line? You know what I mean? And so that's kind of just how the rankings were done. It doesn't mean that it's gonna, be way later than the other two sides, but if there's opportunity, it would grade better as a segment. And it was just how we separated the projects. I mean, a lot of these corridors we could actually separate. Just talking about Beardsley, for example, we have that as one corridor, but that technically could be broken down into segments too. And it's just kind of, where do you start and where do you draw the line on doing that? So.
May I get a?
I don't know if you could add to that, Steve.
Well, I'm going to ask a clarifying question. So let's talk 2 different points in time. So today, well, let's talk 5 years from now. 5 years from now, we'll hopefully have a facility that goes from downtown all the way up to 240th, protected, up Bothell Way. And then we would have bike lanes from there until 228th. The spine and vision is the segment you're saying, go to 9th a little bit to the west, and then you go up 9th, which currently doesn't have a facility. But let's say toward 10 years from now, multimodal, we get 9th, and we have 9th there, and we have Bothell Everett Highway. Then that segment becomes a connector segment, I think is what you're saying, and it becomes important. And I think that needs to be kept in mind, and then the prioritization doesn't keep that into mind right now. We do have those 4 projects that we said connect existing facilities, and we could, at that point, say that might jump to a different list where this has connectivity issues, that maybe it makes more sense to finish this piece and get good bang for the buck. So I think that's something we need to consider, but I think it's also a point in time where we see we get our large segments put together and we can get best bang for the buck to fill in a piece that allows us to go farther. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's hard to do that now because there's so many pieces missing that we have to fill in before we have these segments we can put in.
Sure. I guess maybe I was conflating the ranking with, project funding. And that might not necessarily be the reason why projects are ranked. So,
and that's another piece that I think Sherman was trying to get across is we have, some of these $3 and $4 million ones that are highly ranked are pretty well situated. Once you start getting into the $320 million ones, that gets very difficult. And there may be periods of time when we can do large projects like that. But some of the smaller ones down the list that are smaller amounts, those might be lower hanging fruit because there are more grants available at that size. So that's why we say this is a tool, but not the end all. It doesn't mean we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It just gives us a tool that will make sure we're looking at things and see prioritization if this were our only criteria. But what money we can get, connectivity, those kind of things matter as well. So.
Understood. Great. Thank you. That's all I have about the project numbers, but I do have more to talk about other things.
Well, perhaps continuing Carson's point, Commissioner Curd's point, when we looked at the Canyon Park plan, the overall plan for development of that area, 9th Avenue was very significant for transportation through there. And there was a need identified to widen it for sidewalks. There's a school there with, inadequate paths for walking. So and we also heard from the Canyon Park folks alluding to the transportation issues in that area. So I think 9th Avenue will become important, and that would make that connectivity very important as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the one other piece I want to let you know of as well is, as an example, in our CFP, in our current budget, we put together the bike program, which we have some money in there, but not enough. We put seed money in there, but we're going to rely on our comp plan and maybe a levy in the future to beef that up. But that's only going to build bike-only projects. So as I alluded to, I think in the past, I've been talking to many committees, there are projects like 9th Avenue and 35th Avenue. 9th Avenue between 524 and 228th, and 35th between 240th and 228th. Those are very similar in the sense that they're one-lane roads in each direction. They have no sidewalks in most of it. They have no bike lanes on most of it. That's a prime example of what we call a multimodal transportation project, and they're large projects. They're $20, $30 million projects because you put in road improvements for safety, like left turn lanes, which, although they widen the road, if people have to hold up traffic while they get into their driveway or their neighborhood, that's a safety issue often. So that's the vehicle part, and then we put the bike part in, and we put the ped part in. It competes very well for the larger grants. So that's separate money. That's not necessarily bike money. So we will get those corridors done as large transportation multimodal projects. That's not coming out of the bike program. So we're looking at different ways to get our facilities in. And, again, that's why this list will help us prioritize, but it's not necessarily going to be the order that you'll see that 9th Avenue is probably not at the top, neither is 35th. But as far as our transportation large projects go, they're toward the top. That's how we wrote the CFP this time around. So it gets kind of complex. And the last thing I will want to say is our goal is to get a first bike plan out and a network, and it's not going to be perfect. It's kind of like that old, saying that you build sidewalks in the college campus where people go. We will have to look at our network, and as we start our network and we get more completion done, we'll have to see how people are using them and how well it's going. And there may be opportunities, example, north of Ross Road or in that neighborhood. There's some great issues and everything there, but depending on what kind of developments go there, maybe we can get connectivity. So it's a living document, and we can't just say, well, we're done. It's a start. And I think if we get a good start, please be aware that there are going to be gaps and things that we need to fill in, and we'll need to make corrections, and we'll learn that something works better than other things, and we'll have to make those changes. So it's going to be a living document that we're going to continue to have to work on.
Thank you. Other commissioners? All right, so we're in the public hearing on this item. Absent any other commissioner questions or comments, I'll ask if there are any public indicating an interest.
There are no attendees in any of the rooms.
Okay, so there is no public comment then in this public hearing. So next steps.
Did Sarah send you all a written comment, a written public comment that was shared?
Gee, I didn't, thought I looked earlier today.
Sherman, do you recall the written one that came in?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. It was from David Leviton.
I'm not sure I got that.
I've got my email open here and I don't see it.
Sherman, if you send it to me, or I think you can send it to there should be a planning commission group via email.
Let's see.
So
Is it
from a,
long? We could just read it
Send
into
it.
the record.
What would you like me to do? I can send it to you right now, Ashley, if you want.
Would you all like me to read it into the record since not everyone has access to email?
yes, I think
Okay.
you'd have to do that for us to be able to.
Yeah.
I can do it, or you can, if you want.
How's your throat feeling?
It's fine.
All right,
okay.
Steve's going to read it.
Okay.
Okay, so this is from David Leviton, I think.
Yeah.
So he says, I see on the proposed map, page 144. I'll give you guys about 10 seconds. Okay, so he says that Bothell Everett Highway in downtown Bothell is a neighborhood greenway. Regardless of what signage may exist, I do not believe this route should be included on any bike plan without facilities equivalent to the stress level of the road. This area of Bothell Everett Highway has no facilities despite having relatively high speeds and a large volume of cars. While the parking areas are normally designated as the bike facilities here, I'd strongly doubt that anyone would allow any children to bike in that area. Even experienced bikers will likely stay away given the large number of threats. Example, parked cars on both sides and substantial cross traffic. That's his first item.
Again, which road was that? Bothell Everett?
Bothell Everett Highway on page 144, I believe is talking about the multi-way boulevard section where the bike lanes are in the parking lanes.
Okay. Yeah, doors are a challenge.
So number 2, following my previous suggestion, I do not see a safe path from Bothell Landing into downtown, whereas I think this should be a priority given the amount of traffic from the Sammamish River Trail and our bridge. I strongly advocate for either a separated path between Bothell Landing and Main Street or to use a protected bike lane on 98th Avenue Northeast. Additionally, there is no current safe way shown between downtown Bothell and the future protected bike lanes on Bothell Everett Highway north of downtown. Did I read too fast? Okay. And then item 3, there's extremely poor north-south connectivity through southern Bothell, and the only two routes on the are on the eastern and western edges of the city. I'd strongly advocate recognizing 112th Place Northeast, aka Lazy Husband Road, as a biking facility. Those are his 3 comments.
Okay, thank you. And that'll be forwarded to us as well. It'll be part of the record.
It will be part of the record. We can forward it to you all as well.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether we're going to be prepared to act on this without findings. I'm not sure how everyone is feeling. Typically, we have findings, conclusions, and recommendations when we act, and they weren't ready this evening. Commissioner Curd?
Thanks. I have some additional comments on some of the plan document, one item on the plan document, and then a couple of items in the in the summary, talking about our Imagine Bothell comprehensive plan, recognizing that those are more community development and long-term related issues, but those might be good to include with findings and recommendations as well.
Okay. Do you have something prepared you want to read? Because then we could be sure that then it'll give staff something to work on.
Yeah, sure. So, I guess sticking with the plan for right now, on page 190, there is a diagram of typical intersection treatments. And then on page 191, there are a variety of other intersection treatments. And I am not as excited about page 190 as I am about page 191. I'm wondering if that was the correct figure that was used, or if I'm missing something, because none of those treatments appear to be included in the typical intersection treatments. None of the 191 is included in 190.
So those, the drawings in the appendices for intersection treatments were developed with the help of our consultant. They just put some examples, if you will, together for intersection treatments. Our plan, and in the plan, it's written that we will use NACTO intersection treatments that consider the islands and stuff to extend traffic out around corners and whatnot like that, and as well as separated, bike and pedestrian crosswalks. So, we don't really have a specific intersection design that we would just call out and say, this is how we're going to do all of our intersections. We're going to use the tools that are used nationally and apply those to a specific situation, given geometric constraints, given traffic volumes, given the, what if there's two routes crossing each other, for example, it's going to be a variety of different treatments that we use. So what you see in the appendices, as far as intersection treatments go, is not a specific example of how what we use. We may use a portion of one, but all of the treatments will be based on NACTO guidelines and national accepted standard guidelines.
Understood. I would encourage the deletion of the typical intersection treatment figure on page 190 then, because it does suggest otherwise to readers. So I'm encouraged by using NACTO guidelines, and a lot of the treatments on page 191 of whatever appendix this is, they're encouraging and they're inspiring, but page 190 gives me great pause looking at and kind of imprinting a couple of our large intersections, especially at 228th and Bothell Everett Highway. That's kind of what I was thinking this was trying to display. And it's not, and I understand that, but readers who might be excited about bike safety would not interpret that this way. So I would encourage you to just strike the figure because it may be a little bit misleading. My other comments are about the comprehensive plan, and these are on page, yep, thank you. So page 141, is where it's kind of starts the policies in the transportation element. And then, so I have two suggestions, maybe. I don't know where to provide comment about the comprehensive plan update yet. And it may be early, but these are some things that came up during all of our discussions about the bike plan. And we should have a space where we can record these so that when we are going through comprehensive plan amendments or update, we can encourage change on these. So TRA 62 on page 143, encourage existing and new employers and businesses to provide convenient bike parking facilities for employees and customers. We talked about, well, one, it's required by code. And so this should be require. And then we also had great discussion about safe bike parking, like lockers and just the kind of environment of the storage too, making sure that it's well lit, that there are eyes on it. Furthermore, I think we had a little bit of discussion, I think on commission, or maybe this was in one of the bike plan meetings about some of the more artistic bike racks. Thank you, Commissioner Westerbeck. On especially on Main Street, there's one particularly zany one that aren't actually bolted down to the ground. And so part of having safe bike parking means making sure that there are standards about what kinds of bike parking we expect from facilities. The other comment I have about it is on page 142, TRA 56. This is investigate bike connections between neighborhoods, growth and activity centers, and transit facilities to improve access and safety for all users. This is something that is only kind of adjacent to this, but transit facilities includes buses. And so in Bothell, we have the Swift Green Line, and it's kind of cutting edge in that they allow bikes to be driven right on, or not ridden, but driven right onto the bus for storage, and then you take them off the bus, and that helps with speeding up on and off boarding. But I understand that Sound Transit and Metro haven't really collaborated or corroborated any safe and quick bike storage on their vehicles yet. And so I'd like to see the city champion good bike onboarding and offboarding from rapid transit, especially because our city will have 3 lines going through it by, the time we finally get it. And so I don't mean to say that the Swift line gets everything right about it, but that's definitely something that we should enshrine in kind of our guiding vision for the city, is making sure that we collaborate with and that we take a position on design of transit facilities, which include buses, when we're thinking about our bike plan and making sure that people can get from one bus stop to another successfully and safely by bike.
So I suggest when we develop findings for this item that we have a specific planning commission finding regarding facilitating the integration of bicycle riding with the transit system, or somehow onboarding the bicycles onto transit. Because we've done that before. That's how we specifically memorialize what our messages are on these, is through these findings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. That's a good idea.
Other Commissioner Gustafson?
Thank you, Chair. Sarah Gustafson here. Commissioner Curd, I really appreciate you going through this so carefully. Your comments on storage made me remember that should we add a policy, an action, or a finding regarding maintenance of bikeways?
Commissioner Curd?
Is that, I mean, yeah, there's definitely like the capital element of the bike plan, and then there's the operations of and maintenance. And so I'm not sure if that's just something to kind of highlight in our, maybe our findings are that, you know, half of this vision is including the right of way and including the pavement and the protection, and then the other half is maintaining. That was a big portion of some of the previous discussion.
Okay, other commissioners? So I guess I'm looking to staff. We do really need some findings to take an action per our bylaws, and there are a couple of issues raised. Do you have anything for us, or are we better to continue this one as well?
We should have some space on the December 7th docket, which we are going to talk about what we have left for the end of the year later in tonight's agenda. And so I think we can, you know, knowing how much of the conversation has happened and what may be left to address, make time for the findings and hopefully getting it to the point that you all can make a recommendation for City Council.
All right, thank you. Yeah, this is an important item to the city and to many of the commissioners directly. So I think we would like to have a little time to review those findings and make some specific comments before taking action. I'm speaking for myself. I'd welcome other commissioners to weigh in as to whether we are prepared. So I guess that would be a question whether there's a motion to continue this pending getting findings for our review. Is there such a motion? Yes, Commissioner Robson.
I would like to make a motion to continue this hearing pending on getting findings for the review, for our review.
Thank you, Commissioner Robson. Is there a second?
I will second that. This is Commissioner Westerbeck.
Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded that we continue this hearing pending the receipt of findings, conclusions, and recommendations. Are there any discussion, anything that people want specifically to be included beyond what we discussed today, or any other discussion around this motion? Commissioner Curd?
Thank you. I would like to ensure that we have a specific finding about the inadequacy of paint markings alone to provide protection for all ages and abilities.
Thank you. Any discussion around that? All right, I saw a lot of head nodding, so I think you can take that as a sense of the commission. We'd like that included. Anything else we're interested in?
Just from staff, if you're going to make a motion to continue, could you include a date that you'd like to continue to?
So
Okay.
we look for an amendment to continue to December 7th. Commissioner Robson?
I'll add to my previous motion that we should, we should continue on December 7th.
And do we have a second on that, Commissioner
I'll follow
Westerbeck?
Commissioner Westerbeck, just following up on that, I second the motion to continue the public hearing to December 7th on the bike plan.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion around that? So staff comfortable with that, December 7th? I think we were close, but we do need that. All right, thank you. Here, that all in favor of that motion then to continue, Commissioner Westerbeck?
I know we've been critical, but I do at least want to acknowledge, I appreciate the work you did to go back and comb through this and I understand that Sharrows were not a productive use of the bike plan policy, and to listen to us and the council and to whip this into a much more productive bike plan that I think has some legs for future multimodal options in Bothell. I think it's going to significantly better than what we saw months ago. So appreciate that very much.
So I saw a lot of head nodding on that. The commission does appreciate staff's work on this, and we do look forward to bringing it to completion. So thank you for your work here. So with that, all in favor of the motion to continue the hearing on the bike plan to December 7th?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, we have unanimous consent on that. We'll look forward to completing that at our next meeting. So we'll move along on our agenda. There is no study session this evening. The downtown amendments have been deferred. Unfinished business. Commissioner Gustafson raised an issue, and would you like to speak further to that around middle housing?
Thank you, Chair. Sarah Gustafson here. I move that we tonight inquire with our Deputy Director about when might the council be disposed to hear or put on their agenda the missing middle legislation. And once we've figured out when that time might be, talk among ourselves about nominating a person or writing a letter to council to recommend that they take on the legislation consideration with some urgency.
So we have in the past formed, I think, a committee of two. Can we go? I don't know that we can go three because we risk a quorum, which is 6 of us. But we have had people draft a letter for signature and submission to the council if that's the interest on this matter. Deputy Director Winchell, did you have a comment? I saw you.
Yeah, I can provide you all an update. So ideally, this would have gotten to council sooner, but we also are going through budget, which has taken up a lot of time. So what we're looking at and what we've been working on with the city manager's office is we're hoping to get this for a study session with city council on the 17th of January. And then we're looking at having hopefully 2 to 3 study sessions because we understand there's a lot of public interest in this and there's a lot to break down in how we got here and what it means for Bothell and the importance of this ordinance. So we're looking at right now at a minimum of probably 2 study sessions, one on the 17th and one on February 7th. And then we're allotting for a public hearing either on the 14th or the 21st. But we're also recognizing that it may be a couple of public hearings based on public interest. So we're trying to make sure that we're giving council the time they need to hear from the public and make a decision and break down all of the information that's coming to them, but also trying to make sure that we keep it moving, knowing that it's very important to both Planning Commission, council, and then also implementing the city's housing strategy.
And that was February 14th and 21st for those
That is
projected.
the goal, and once we get that confirmed, we can most certainly let you all know, but right now that is our goal of getting to a public hearing on either on the 14th or the 21st.
Yeah, there has been significant public feedback around involvement, and I've heard a little rumbling about it. Some of it based on misconceptions. So, yeah, it'll get interesting. With that said, is there an interest in drafting a letter expressing the interest of the commission in moving this forward? Looking at that timeline, we'd certainly have time to review such a letter, either the next meeting, the 7th, or presuming, I don't know if we'll meet December 21st. That starts to get stepping on holidays.
We'll talk about that under reports from staff.
Okay.
So we could reopen up this subject if you wanted.
Okay. Well, I would suspect you could probably get a letter drafted by the 7th if we have 2 folks who would like to do that. Is that an interest? I see some head nodding. So I think the process would be for there to be a motion that we draft a letter. Yes, Commissioner Robson.
Just to clarify, so we're looking for 2 people to draft a letter asking council to speed things up? or to emphasize our prioritization of this issue?
I would look to Commissioner Gustafson since you raised the issue. I think that's what you had in mind, but this was your issue.
Thank you for that great question. Sarah Gustafson here. I do believe that when I was thinking of it, the focus was urgency because I know it will get to council, but I believe that our original timeline based on the Housing Action Plan Implementation Grant was for this fall. And I think it's important to have some legislation on the books in the next year so that when we do our comprehensive plan, which we have a grant to help us expand, we'll have legislation that's already there so we can see, well, what are the impacts, what needs to be changed in the legislation so that we can really make it better going forward. Yes, and I would say personally, it just hurts to have it linger. And it's good to keep things moving while they're fresh in our heads, while the council knows that we've done this work.
Commissioner Robson?
This is for Commissioner Gustafson. So given that we now have an updated timeline, are you feeling that we should continue to prompt them regarding urgency just so that they stick to the earlier days of like the 14th as opposed to the 21st? Or I guess given now that they do have a vague timeline to complete by end of February, do you feel like the letter is still necessary? Or what are you thinking?
Thank you. I believe that a letter is necessary, and I don't quite know what the timing of this would be, but the goal would be for council to have a vote on this before summer. Just let's throw that out there. Would that be realistic, Deputy Director?
So our grant timeline, there's two things that we're aiming for in this. When they passed, I'll try to summarize the legislation correctly. When they passed the legislation for this grant funding, there was also some assurances in terms of essentially safe harbors for adoption. And so there's an April 1st safe harbor. If we don't pass anything by April 1st, then there's other amendments we will need to make to our comprehensive plan before we can adopt the middle housing. And so we're aiming for getting it done prior to April because of that safe harbor. If we don't meet that deadline, then it will extend this out because we will need to make amendments to our comprehensive plan because there's protection from appeals to the Growth Management Hearings Board. And so while it's not necessarily a rush to avoid appeals, we have planned it with that safe harbor in mind. And so that's how our timeline has been set up so far. And so if it's not heard before that, and of course we want to take the time that it's needed to get the ordinance correct. And so that comes down to council, determining if what we've presented to them and all of that meets their goals. But so long story around that is our goal first is to have something adopted prior to April, based on our original timeline. But of course can't control how some of those things end up happening.
Commissioner Westerbeck?
Just a question, maybe a point of clarification. I know in other cities, because I read about middle housing a lot, there have been sort of letters like you've proposed, but they were more about sort of an executive summary of why we proposed what we did and what we did, not necessarily what we did over the year, but why we arrived at the conclusions and sort of the sort of summary you would often see, in a report. So I wonder if that was your intent also, just kind of lay out the basic argument for the ordinance we arrived at so they would understand the importance of it as they go in to study it. Was that part of the intention?
Thank you, Commissioner Westerbeck. I do believe any way we can put a human face on it, even if it's our faces who've been doing it a lot, it will help. A summary, an emotional appeal, an appeal to urgency, any or all. I think we could figure it out. But yeah, those would be great. Thank you.
So we have in our meetings a number of times talked about the urgency to move on middle housing and the housing crisis that we're in. And again, the commission has, on a number of occasions that I can recall, drafted letters to the council on items that were important to the commission, and then either the chair or another designated member would go and read that letter into the record to kind of emphasize to them, more than just send it off in an email and let it sit, to have it be part of a public meeting. So if there is an interest of the commission to do that, we can certainly have a motion that an ad hoc committee be formed to draft such a letter. We could then, I would hope we could get that done in time for the December 7th meeting and put it under our standing item report to council, bring it on the next agenda, get a draft letter in our packet. We could all review it, discuss it. I can sign it, and then we could decide who reads it, one of us, if that's an interest. So do we have such a motion to form such an ad hoc committee, and then we could see which members are interested in being on that committee? A motion?
I have motion as stated that we form an ad hoc committee to present a letter in person to City Council on this matter.
Excuse me, so we would draft a letter to review at the December 7th meeting. Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Commissioner Robson, seconds. Any discussion around that? All right. All in favor of such a motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. I see you all in favor. I'd ask for, and I think we have to be two, because we don't want to have a public meetings issue with a quorum, and since there's only 6 of us. So do we have 2 members who would like to take a lead on that? Okay, Commissioner Robson?
I can go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll have Commissioners Robson and Gustafson work together, draft a letter, get it to staff prior to that meeting so it could be in our packet. We would review it and vote on that at our next meeting. Okay, does that work for all involved?
It does work for all involved, and then we would need it in our packet the Wednesday prior to Planning Commission, which I don't have a calendar. Well, I could pull a calendar up, but have not.
Yeah, well, the meeting is the 7th, so I think the Wednesday prior would probably be the 1st.
So we would need it the 30th of November.
Oh, the 30th. And again, that would be a draft letter that we would discuss. So if you have questions for open issues for further discussion, certainly that, you can keep that in mind, and we can take it from there. But thank you for volunteering to do that work. We've all discussed the importance of it, so we'll look forward to that. Any other unfinished business then? Seeing none, reports from staff.
So we wanted to update you all on where we are with certain items. I think we all know that we've had turnover this year and changes that have resulted in some things taking longer than ideally they would. And so we wanted to provide an update on that, but then also wanted to talk to you all about the fact that we have 2 meetings at the end of this year falling very inconveniently close to holidays. And so wanted to make sure, knowing that we are down a commissioner, which hopefully there will be interviews following Thanksgiving, but wanted to talk to you all about what we project on our agendas, and then make sure that if we're going to hold a meeting, we're going to have a quorum and that we're going to have subject matter for that meeting. So I'm going to share a document that I pulled together just to outline what we anticipate coming forward to you all. So on December 7th, we have 3 potential items. I've been working on the fly in the meeting, so I've already updated it. But essentially, we anticipate potentially having downtown transition affordable overlay private code amendments. We were waiting on some items from the applicants to make sure that we had a full package to bring to you all. And so assuming that they get us those items on time, we're hoping to bring you all a study session to continue that conversation on the 7th. We'll also have the public hearing on the transfer of development rights. And on the bike plan. So that's what we're anticipating on the 7th. We had thought about bringing you all the 2023 planning docket, but seeing as how long that meeting is already getting, it seemed like that is an item that could probably warrant its own meeting. So that's our projected agenda for the 7th. And then where we end up getting into some more tricky timelines is we have on December 21st, or I'm sorry, December 21st, we have a meeting, and then on January 4th, we have a meeting. On either of those meetings, we could potentially do the planning docket, or anything like private code amendments or a study session on the upcoming comprehensive plan. That being said, we put together some scheduling questions later on, which I'm realizing I put this in a weird order. So scheduling questions of, are people going to be present on the 21st? We could keep the meeting on the 21st. We could move it up to the 14th, or we could cancel the meeting in general. And then the same for the 4th. We could either keep the meeting of the 4th, we could move it back to the 11th, or we could just cancel it altogether. And so hearing from the commission on availability and interest would be helpful for us as we plan out our agendas. And then if there is a meeting you all do want to cancel, I believe you could make a motion to cancel or move that meeting. And then if we moved it, we could schedule it as a special meeting and advertise it based on the holidays. And then just to feed into that conversation, again, our active private comprehensive plan amendments, there's the downtown amendments that are ongoing. There also is an amendment that you probably haven't seen since the docket, but the Ferrulo amendment. So if you know where Mercury Coffee is on the east side of Bothell Everett Highway, they applied for a private amendment as we continued forward with scoping out the comprehensive plan and looking at our growth deficit in Snohomish County. We know we're going to be doing some more significant sub-area planning there. And so we've met with the applicant and talked about the potential for their site, and they are very likely going to withdraw their application to then participate in the comprehensive plan efforts, which we think is a win-win for all of us to have a more cohesive look and also to potentially have better development potential on that site, because every time I drive by it, I think about this huge chunk of land that could be really used in a really cool way. So that is potentially coming off the docket. The transfer of development rights is obviously active. The bike plan is active. We'll, of course, be doing the 2023 planning docket, which will be very comprehensive plan heavy. And then the one item that in all the transition has not made any movement is the Downtown Historic Preservation Code amendment. So it's very likely you'll see that on the docket with docketed time for 2023 to pick that back up. We've had conversations about how much it's impacting by not being moved forward, and it was kind of the lowest impact on our everyday operations, but we do recognize that it's something we want to bring forward to you all, so it'll probably be later next year when we get to that amendment. And then another thing that hasn't been added to this as it happened last night, but we'll also be having some conversations about outdoor dining downtown based on direction from City Council. So with all of that in mind, just thinking about the next two meetings and what we anticipate having on your agenda. The 7th, we have a pretty well flushed out agenda, and then the 21st or the 21st of December or the 4th of January, the focus will very likely be our 2023 docket and potentially some updates on downtown if it's the downtown code amendments if ready, and potentially a kind of intro to our comprehensive plan update. So with that, happy to hear from you all on what dates you're available, how you'd like to move forward, and then we'll schedule accordingly.
So quick question then, if we were to move the 21st meeting to the 14th, the primary item would be the planning docket. Would you be prepared a week earlier?
That is a great question.
Don't want to push something that we can't do.
I would say that we will be more prepared in January as we are bringing our new director up to speed and kind of getting used to being fully staffed again. Having December to work on that would be very helpful.
So if we were to move it forward, it would very likely be a general discussion which we would need to revisit in a future meeting, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but we should recognize that.
Yes, you might
Okay.
get a couple touches instead of maybe one long, thorough meeting.
I don't recall us making through it in one meeting last time anyway.
Okay.
But
I haven't been here, so I'm just, I'll
so with that, I'll poll the commissioners and we'll take the 21st first and then talk about the 4th. We need, per our bylaws, at least 4 commissioners for a quorum to take any action. Do we have folks who know they have a conflict on the 24th, just a couple of days before Christmas? 21st, I'm sorry. A couple of days before the 24th, when we'll all be busy. It's Saturday, right? Oh, yes, Commissioner Andrews, sorry.
Yeah, I'm traveling from the 18th through the 30th, so I'll be out of town on the 21st.
Okay, so you would not be available to participate, all right? Thank you. That's one. Do we have another commissioner any other commissioners challenge? I see some calendar scrolling. Okay, so I think we have a quorum available. We'll miss Commissioner Anders and hope you have safe and happy travels. But I think we can make the 21st then, giving you the time, a little more time on the docket. I also, again, suspect the docket may bleed over. So then proceeding to the 4th, do we have any folks who cannot make the 4th? Commissioner Anders, I think you said your travel schedule crosses over past the 4th, correct?
No, I'll be back.
Oh, you'll be back, okay. So anyone else not available on the 4th? Okay, I'll ask staff, how does that work for you folks?
The 4th, we may have more staff out the week prior. So there may, we can probably get something put together. And we also, I think, based on our availability and what ends up happening, can communicate with you all if we end up not being able to have a packet based on staffing. But we should have people in the office and able to hold that meeting. And we can focus on the docket. And the convenient thing about having a new deputy and a new director is we have no vacation time. So we'll be here.
No vacation accrued. So I guess we'll keep the 4th on our schedule and if need be, revisit it on the 7th or the 21st.
Yeah, and then of course, if any of you all, as it gets closer and you just are feeling in the holiday spirit and not in the planning commission spirit and aren't going to be here, let us know and we can adjust accordingly if we find out our quorum, because we'll assume we have 6 members until further notice.
Yes.
If we think we're going to run into a quorum problem, we'll let you know.
Well, just looking at the bylaws, we need 4 present, regardless of how many are on the commission. Yeah. Having a new member might make it easier to keep 4, but. Yes. All right. I think that, so we don't need a motion if we keep things the way they are.
Yep.
So I think we addressed that issue. Any other, are we on reports from staff or unfinished business? I forget.
I think we're on reports from staff.
Okay. Anything else?
At this point in time, no. I think either on the 7th or the 21st, our new director will be able to join us and you all get a chance to meet them, which I think will be really helpful as we move forward with the docketing process. And then we will bring, I think with the 2023 docket, we'll revisit the 2022 docket too in a more thorough way, because I think we did go through it roughly to provide the update tonight, but I think there are still some things like housekeeping amendments and other things that will spill into 2023.
Okay. Yeah, that is useful to go through and see what we took off, what the accomplishments are, what's still pending, and then talk about what's new. So thank you. We'll look forward to that. Commissioner Westerbeck.
Maybe I missed it. Did you cover council's interviewing for planning commission members soon? Is that correct?
I believe they're interviewing on the 29th. That's
okay, yeah, because I saw something about it in the meeting last night.
Yeah.
Because they want to do non-recording or something like that. The 29th, okay.
Yes.
And then Did they cover the process for selecting? They were going to select within a week or anything like that?
I would have to revisit the recording to
that's all
remember
right.
exactly.
I can go back and look at it too.
Okay.
I was just curious about that. Thank you.
Yeah, my notes were it was open till the 18th for application, so.
So hopefully there'll be a good candidate there and we'll be back to fully staffed on planning commission too.
Okay, good. All right, so is that reports from staff?
That is all I have tonight.
All right, thank you. Members, reports from members. Commissioner Curd.
Thank you. For those who don't get my newsletter, I'm kidding, I don't have a newsletter. I have 4 items, but hopefully we'll keep them short here. And I wrote them down because there's too much for me to remember. The first is that the City of Bothell Surface Water Management Division is proceeding with the Sammamish River and Wayneta Creek Restoration Project. It's on the back 9 of the former Wayne Golf Course. They have a virtual open house on the city's website right now, and there's a community meeting webinar scheduled tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. You should attend because it's interesting, and also to learn about the alternatives for restoring natural stream and river processes to the former back 9. It's the one that's adjacent to Blythe Park. The next one is that the Washington State Department of Commerce is hosting a virtual webinar on December 6th. It's from 3 to 4:30 in the afternoon, and it's to provide guidance on racially disparate impacts for local governments doing housing planning. This it includes exclusion and displacement risks, and it's one of the outcomes of that former House Bill 1220 that was supported by Bothell State Legislative Delegation. The state, this is number 3, the state has also hired the middle housing experts at Opticos Design to assist with developing a communication and outreach toolbox around middle housing for local governments. And so those resources are in progress now, and they will nicely complement our recommendation to council. And then I also, lastly but not least, I wanted to take a moment to recognize Deputy Director Winchell, who received the Barbara Grace Award from the Washington chapter of the American Planning Association. Congratulations, that's awesome. Yeah. So that award distinguishes planners who make great communities happen and represent the cutting edge future of planning in Washington State. So awesome job, congrats.
Thanks for that. And I don't know if everyone knows this, but Barbara Grace was a planner here at the City of Bothell and did a lot of historic preservation work. And if you go to, oh my gosh, the name of the park's escaping me, the Brick Road Park, there's actually a memorial for her there that Dave Boyd showed me. So it was extra special finding out that she was an employee here and whatnot. So thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Curd. Other commissioners? No, oops, seeing none.
First of all, sorry, Sarah
Sorry.
Gustafson here. First of all, congratulations, Deputy Director Winchell. That's so exciting. And also, Commissioner Curd, will you send those links to the webinars too?
I will send them to staff and they will send them out.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you. Other comments? All right, so we did push a bit on some items in this meeting, but I'm sure I'm speaking for the whole commission, thanking staff for the work you've done on these items and your receptiveness to our comments. There's a lot of interest here, and we do, I'll look across the table, but we do think you hear us when we speak, so we do appreciate that. And may have taken a little bit longer on an item or two, but I think it's to all of our benefit. So thank you for all that. So there being no further business, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting? Commissioner Curd.
I move to adjourn tonight's meeting.
All right, all in favor? I don't think we need a second on that. All right, it's unanimous. We will adjourn this evening's meeting. Our next meeting will be December 7th. I hope you all have a very nice Thanksgiving and come back and do some more planning. Thank you all. Good night.